So now that the numbering is done, it's just a matter of putting it on the lathe. 1, 2, 3 clockwise on side number A, and on the opposite side I've offset the number 1, and it's 1, 2, 3 counterclockwise. Now I can put it on the lathe between centers, point 1 to point 1 and turn that face, point 2 to point 2 and turn that face, point 3 to point 3 and turn that face. So point 1 on the headstock end and point 1 on the tailstock end. Tighten everything down nice and tight. Rotate the piece by hand to make sure it clears the tool rest. Check my speed. It's a little on the low side. I can turn it up in just a second. Grab my tool and start to make the first cut. Stop and take a look, and even though it's still early in the going, we can start to see that twist already starting to go along there. Couple more cuts. That's pretty good. I'm going to go a little bit further. I want to get this nice and clean. I'm going to crank the speed up. I was at about 1800. I'm going to crank it up to about 2500. Nice, slow, controlled cuts. Still a little rough there. Sometimes you may find you need to cut the other direction. That felt better. Much cleaner. So that's face number 1 done. Now we can move to face number 2, cut that face, face number 3, and then cut that face. Back off the tailstock, rotate around, point number 2 on the headstock end, point number 2 on the tailstock end. Lots of pressure. Rotate the piece by hand to make sure we have clearance over the tool rest, and we're ready to cut again. May cut better the other direction. That feels significantly better. Stop and take a look at our progress. This was face number 1 we cut just a second ago. This is face number 2 that we're cutting right now. And there is our twist starting to form right along there, right where those two faces intersect. We'll try and clean that up a little bit, and then we'll be ready to move on to number 3. Cranking the speed up, that's about 2700 RPM. one more cut. There we go. That was number 1 from a second ago. This is number 2. This will be face number 3, and we'll do that one now. Back off the tailstock. Point number 3 on the headstock end. Point number 3 on the tailstock end. Lots of pressure. Rotate the piece by hand. I'm going to turn the speed back down a little bit. That's about 2,000 RPM. Cut the other direction, see if it feels any better. A little bit. Take a look at our progress. So this was number 1. This is number 2. This is now number 3. That facet right there and that facet right there, they need to go away. A couple more cuts. I'm going to turn the speed up again. 2,700 RPM. Nice light cuts. Trying to start that cut on an interrupted surface can be a pain sometimes. And there we go. That's face number 3. This was number 2. This was number 1. Nice clean lines. There's our 120 degree twist along the length of the piece. So this is the shape that we get if we just turn a straight line. If I turn this back on and look at it, I'm just turning a straight line there, just as if I were trying to turn a true cylinder. What happens if we change the shape that we turn? What if we don't turn a straight line? What if we turn something like a cove? Well, this is what you end up with if you do something like that. So I'm going to put point number 1 on that end to point number 1 on this end, back between centers. I'm not going to turn on this because I've already done it, but the shape that I'm turning on this, just turning a cove, fairly deep cove, but just a cove, not a straight line anymore. If I do that on all 3 faces, I end up with same amount of twist. The piece is the same length, started out the same size. This has been turned down to a smaller diameter. Same degrees of twist. Everything else is exactly the same. The only thing that has changed is the shape that I've turned in the piece. In this piece, I've turned a cove. On the other piece, I was just turning a straight line. Different effects from the same piece, depending on the shape that we turn. Three sides, 120 degree twist.